everyone. Welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. This right here is Nick Wright. We got a lot going on in the NFL after 4 weeks of football. You got Todd Gurley, who's calling out his coach. You got Adam Thielen, who's calling out his quarterback. And you got Tom Brady, who's calling out himself. Hope everyone's got a great data plan. That's where we're going to start.
Is today
Patriots. Today is...
It's Tuesday, Jenna.
Yes. Big Monday night game last night.
Oh, it is Tuesday. Yeah. So the Patriots barely escaped Sunday's game against the Bills. Their 6-point win was their smallest margin of victory so far this season. The win came in large, or in all part, thanks to their defense. Certainly not their offense, and certainly not their quarterback. Nobody knows that more than the quarterback himself, Tom Brady.
I'm frustrated when we don't play well. I'm frustrated when we don't score points. I'm happy when we win. It's a lot of mixed emotions. I mean, I think when you win a game, it's never like, man, I'm 100% in great spirits, and certainly when you lose sometimes, it's not like I'm 100%, negative. I'm trying to be realistic about how I felt out there, how I felt, the game was going and our rhythm. So I'm just dealing with a lot of different emotions, the ups and downs, the mental grind of the game, the physical grind of the game, so it's just a lot of mixed emotions.
There's a lot to get to, and I know that what you said the other day, this is a team that's going to spend a lot of time watching film, and they're probably not going to be happy, CC, with everything they saw. Do you think the Patriots have put enough around Tom Brady to compete with the other teams, the best teams in the NFL?
Well, I don't know how we've watched the last 3 years. They've gone to back to back to back Super Bowls, and if less Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles, they might have won 3 in a row. And we still be sitting here talking, does Brady have enough weapons? The reason why he's the greatest quarterback is not just he has the most Super Bowls, not the most Super Bowl appearances, not the most Super Bowl wins. No, it's because he's been able to do it with less than the other great quarterbacks that we've been able to see. He's been able to be so productive, even in this passing era where that's all we ever say, oh, man, this guy needs this and this guy needs this. You might say that about Tom Brady, but he necessarily doesn't. Because the personnel, how they use their running backs, how they use their tight ends and their wide receivers, they're second to none. Anyone in the league as far as being creative, creating space, getting matchups. He's throwing short passes. He's not throwing deep patterns to the sideline. No, most of his patterns are either short, dink and dunk, or straight down the middle after play action. That's his favorite. Play action fake to the tailback. Down the middle, you have a deep end over the middle. That's what they kill. Edelman, that's his best route. That was Randy Moss, one of his favorite routes to run. That's been one of the staples in it. But Tom Brady, right now, what he's battling is, they've been great, 4-0. But he hadn't been great. He's missed a lot of practice time. They've signed another arm to come into camp last week in Cody Kessler. To me, that sent a smoke signal that Tom is aging. And they're trying to take some of those reps away in practice. And when he gets in the game, Tom Brady is not about that contact. No. Marshawn Lynch, you say, hey, I'm here. I'm for that action, boss. Tom Brady is not here for the action of being contacted. And you can see he's uncomfortable. And my thing with the Patriots is, can they keep him healthy to the postseason? And then I do believe that's when Tom will sit in the pocket a little more. That's when I believe he's going to take more punishment. But until then, I think we're going to see a version of what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Chucking and ducking, bro. He's going to be getting rid of that ball. He is not going to get hit based on him holding the ball, waiting for a guy to get open.
And it's not just the last few weeks we've seen that. We saw that last year. The biggest difference between Brady last year and the 3 previous seasons statistically is how he does under pressure. Under pressure, the 3 years prior, so we're talking about his age 38, 39, and 40-year-old season. So not young Tom Brady, not vintage prime Tom Brady. He was 31-7 touchdown interception and 94 passer rating when pressured. As good as any quarterback in football when pressured. The last 2 years, that's a 68 passer rating when pressured. It's 11 touchdowns to 5 picks. It is because he is not standing in the pocket. He is not going to take that punishment. And by the way, he should not stand in the pocket. He should not take that punishment because the only way this Patriots season goes terribly awry is if Tom Brady gets hurt. their number one goal, more so even than getting the number one overall seed, is have Tom Brady make it to January healthy. So I understand the approach, and it is the smart approach. There's an element of LeBron James taking plays off on defense during the regular season to save himself for later in the year.
Which is understandable.
Which is to this, where it makes sense.
Yeah.
But to me, we can't tilt every conversation to where what more can the Pats do for Brady when what more would you want than the best defense in the conference, maybe in the entire league, the best coach of all time? And so right now what you have is a team who has allowed one defensive score all year. And so that's the best thing you can do for a quarterback, more so than adding Antonio Brown or Randy Moss in 07 or great weapons. Have a defense that's going to hold the opposition to in the teens to where you don't have to do that much offensively, because this year, statistically, Tom Brady's been a slightly above average quarterback, and that's been more than enough because of the defensive pieces and because of the brilliant coaching they have on that team.
Not just defensive pieces, that every part of that defense has really been remarkably playing well for the Patriots. But I listened to that whole Tom Brady interview, and he said something interesting. He said this offense needs to figure out what it does well. You don't usually hear that from Tom Brady 4 weeks into a season. They usually know where their strengths are. What does this offense do well?
Well, right now, when the pass protection is fluctuating, where now they don't know, do I leave a tight end in to help this inexperienced offensive line? They're on their fourth left tackle in 3 years. Now, that's something Tom Brady's not used to. As far as a proven commodity on the offense, the only proven commodity they have is Edelman. He can have him in the slot. He can run some option routes. That's it. But besides that, they're limited. Josh Gordon, he is too inconsistent. That is one of Brady's pet peeves, is consistency, why other receivers, journeymen, have had problems there. Now, Josh, sometimes he's explosive, sometimes he's not explosive. I believe a lot of the time off has zapped a lot of his athleticism. Now, he's still a freak athlete, but imagine if he had had the consistency of playing year after year, and I believe that we see that. And with Tom, he wants to be able to go out there and dictate to the defense what he wants to do, and he can't do that. When you can't practice and you can't force your will on the opposition, it becomes troublesome, even when you're undefeated. And I thought that's what I heard in his voice there.
And Shannon made this point last week, and I think it's a great way to put it. Just because you're the GOAT doesn't mean every year you're the best. And Tom Brady has moved past the point of his career where he is any longer the best quarterback in the NFL. Now, he can still channel it for moments. My Kansas City Chiefs experienced that firsthand in that AFC Championship game, particularly in that overtime. And you can still make the argument in the scenario of down 4, 2 minutes left, is he your number one pick? But that doesn't mean he's going to be the best quarterback in football week in, week out.
Yeah, when I visited with Larry Fitzgerald a couple weeks ago, he told me that he can play at a high level, he just can't sustain it. Like, he can't play 12 great games out of the 16. He can't have that level of intensity during the weekend practice. He's got to really manage how much time he's got to be on the field. And that's just everyone's reality. I do like what Shannon said as far as, yeah, you can be the GOAT, but if you look at the GOAT in every sport, take a little snapshot of the end.
Yeah.
None of the ends are pretty, but we grant them that. I used to tell Jerry Wright, man, keep playing. I don't care if you played 25 years. He had earned the right to be able to go out however he wanted to go out. And I believe that Tom Brady is in that same classification. He's not the same quarterback. Can they keep him healthy to the postseason? That's the biggest question there.
And listen, first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks that are in their prime, we're going to talk later in the show about Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson doesn't have no great running game, doesn't have great wide receivers, doesn't have great offensive line, similar to Tom Brady. And he is still playing at an MVP level because he's 31 years old, in the heart of his prime, at the apex level of his talents. Tom Brady is doing it some way through smoke and mirror at this point, saving up those great moments of brilliance for when they are the most needed. But that's been one of the reasons the Patriots offense hasn't had the punch we would expect is not just because of the weapons, it's because of the quarterback, and that's not an indictment on Brady. That is a reality of 2019.
Well, good news for the Patriots. They have an 0-4 Washington Redskins team coming up. So they'll have a little bit more
That'll
time
be
to
nice
try to figure out.
NFL office
how their
did look out
offense
for him
does.
as far as the schedule.
That is correct. On to the Rams now. On Sunday, Todd Gurley had a career-low 5 carries. His quarterback, Jared Goff, meanwhile, had 68 pass attempts. That's practically 2 games' worth. Gurley was asked about his limited touches, said, I don't call the plays, bro. Like I say, I don't call the plays. I go out there and play. I block for Jared Goff. I run the ball, run the routes, whatever. Whatever the play call is, I'm going to go out there and do it just like everyone else is going to go out there and do their job. It's 11 people on the field, and there's only 1 ball. Cris, can the Rams make a Super Bowl run, another one, with a restricted Todd Gurley?
No, they're not the same team. Their offense doesn't look the same. And regardless of what the Rams are going to say, because this is a tough spot. It's a tough spot for the player to be in. It's a tough spot for the organization. Because the organization has said and tried to do all the right things to protect him. But really what it boils down to, Jenna, is they signed a bad deal. He's damaged goods. He's never going to be 100% again. Now, when they signed him, they thought potentially he might, but they made a miscalculation. They jumped at a contract that they didn't have to. They were trying to restructure their whole front office, everything they were doing, and they thought it was important to sign Todd Gurley. And Todd is a great guy. But, I mean, you're not here for your personality. You're here because you're one of the most explosive running backs that's come into NFL out of college football as far as a dual threat, legitimate 4'3", 220 pounds, 6'1", 6'2". This is a big-time running back. And now it's down to 5 carries a game. There would have to be an explanation. And the explanation is he's not healthy. Anytime you have a 24, 25-year-old who's on a pitch count at training camp, I've been warning people, this is not normal. There's an obvious problem. Last year, you gave him the time off. Then he comes back with the big game. And then after that, when was the last time we seen Todd Gurley have 18 to 20 carries back-to-back weeks and look like one of the best running backs in the NFL? It's been a long time. So this is a bad situation. Todd can't tell us the truth because the truth of the matter is he's not that workload. He can't carry that load like he wanted to. The coaches can't tell us the truth because they're protecting him and they're trying to protect the bad investment that they made from a PR standpoint. So we're going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth till ultimately the Rams have to cut bait.
Todd Gurley.
They're going to have to get off of him. They're going to have to get off that and they're going to have to eat it. And they're going into a new stadium and there's a lot of things going on. But they extended the coach. They extended the quarterback. And when they extended the coach, they extended the general manager. So moving forward, the people that made those decisions, they have job security. But it's going to be at one moment, somebody's going to have to step to a microphone and be like, you know something? He was injured the whole time.
And it would have been, for the Rams, beneficial if they could have just held their water a little bit longer to maybe wait to extend the quarterback till they saw what the quarterback looked like when he doesn't have Offensive Player of the Year Todd Gurley behind him. Because last year, Jared Goff was 2 different quarterbacks. Quarterback with play action and without play action. Last year with play action, with the threat of Todd Gurley, with the threat of, at the time, maybe the most dynamic dual threat running back in football, 16 touchdowns, 2 picks, a 113 rating. Last year with play action. Last year without, 16 touchdowns, 10 picks, a 90 quarterback rating. That is night and day. That is all pro versus below average in today's NFL. This year on play action, the worst play action quarterback amongst the entrenched starters we have in the league. No touchdowns, 3 picks, a 61 rating. Now that there's some noise in that signal and that some of that is defenses figuring out Sean McVay a little more in year 3. Some of that is people picking up on what Belichick did in the Super Bowl. I understand that. And some of that is Jared Goff's got to be better. But a lot of that is those linebackers not going to sink as far forward if they know if you do hand it off to the running back, he doesn't have the breakaway speed. He doesn't have the one-cut ability. He does not have the threat that he once was. And you've seen Goff's production go off a cliff at the same time Todd Gurley's production went off a cliff. Todd hasn't had a great day rushing since the divisional round against Dallas. To your point, hasn't had great back-to-back games rushing since November of last year. He hasn't had a great day receiving since week 15 of last year, and that is a part of this story as well. It's not just the 5 carries. It's that a guy who was similar to, not at this level, but similar to another great Ram, Marshall Faulk, playbook and your ability to kill you catching the ball in addition to running the ball. That has been eliminated from his game nearly entirely, even though I think he had 7 catches this past weekend. It's a killer for them. They had the most dominant defensive player in Aaron Donald, they still do, and the most dominant non-quarterback in football. They no longer have that. That, to me, covered up a lot of limitations they otherwise would have on offense, and they haven't found a workaround yet. So, of course, they're not a Super Bowl team without Todd Gurley. We might start to wonder, are they a division champion? Are they a playoff team if Todd Gurley doesn't get right? And it doesn't look like he's going to get right.
Well, Sean McVay came out this week and took it all, whether deservedly or not, on himself. I'm not doing right by this team play calling. Teams have figured us out. We have to get more creative. We have to change things up. How much of this is, hey, teams have now seen, a year or two under Sean McVay. They know what he does. And how much of it is, as Nick pointed out, the personnel on that offense?
Well, this is the thing. Sean's a young coach, and that's a mistake. It's a mistake by going to the media saying everything's on me, because that's not true. The offensive line is not as good. Their pass protection hadn't been as good. Their outside receiver, Woods and Cook, they haven't been as good. What they would say is, well, it's on the quarterback. Their defense hadn't been as good as far as giving up more big plays. This is not a stingy defense. Like we saw what happened in Sunday's game. So all those things can't be the coach's fault. So when you say things like that, and you don't hear great coaches say things like, everything's all my fault, because it's not. You start to lose your credibility. So with me, how does he reinvent himself? What's his next move? Because I don't have Todd Gurley. Because ultimately, when you have a play caller like him, and I remember when we had Brian Billick, and man, there were teams clamoring. Oh man, we want to do what the Vikings are doing. We want to be 3 receivers. We want to throw the ball. We want to be able to run the ball out 3 receiver sets. Man, I used to be waiting in the meeting for Brian Billick to open up the game plan. What we going to do, coach? And he always had something exciting. When Brian went to Baltimore, that next offensive coordinator, I lost all that. And you lose hope as a player. And then you start doing freelancing. Man, I got to try to do this on my own because the coach is not going to come up with the play. And you start trying to play outside the system. So for me, a credibility factor as far as moving forward, what's the coach going to be known for? Because the league has caught up to him. That's not a myth. Oh, he's new to the league. They don't know him yet. But when they find you out, you better be real good to be able to sustain that success.
And there's an incorrect narrative about what made Sean McVay great and the type of coach he is because he was a coordinator at 28, because he's a head coach at 31 in LA, good-looking guy. People think, oh, he's uber aggressive, super exotic. No, he's not. This is a running football team that plays the same personnel set more than any team in the league, 11 personnel that is very conservative on 4th downs. They seem exotic because they do a lot of pre-snap movement and because the way McVay communicates with the quarterback. But they kick on 4th, they run the football, they trust that we're going to do what we do better than what you do. And when you've had as much success as Sean McVay has had at the youngest age in NFL history, anyone's had that level of success, the idea that you're at 33 years old, that this is the time for a reinvention, man, that's the time most people are going under invention, not reinvention. And so people need to recognize the basis of what the Rams did was a great running game. If that foundation no longer exists, then it will take some major adjustments, but it's ones that I worry McVay has not planned for. It's one of the reasons they paid Gurley early the way they did. They prioritized Gurley because he was the foundational piece of what their offense was.
And the 2 people you're most concerned about are the 2 people they ended up paying and giving them the long-term contracts to. Don't look now, but the Browns are tied for first place in the AFC North. That after a big win Sunday over division rival Baltimore. Baker Mayfield couldn't resist a chance to call out his naysayers, said that he wants everyone who doubted Cleveland to have the same energy now that they won a tough game. His head coach, Freddie Kitchens, tried to temper that sentiment just a little.
But I do know this, if you just keep your head down and keep working, usually good things happen. You turn the corner. I think these guys have done a good job of that, staying focused on inside of our locker room, because that's truly the only thing that matters is inside of our locker room. They've done a good job of that, of just trying to get better. We're going to try to get better off of this game too. This is one game. Just like last week, it was just one game. This is one game. We've got, I don't know how many more, 12 more to go.
He did the math well.
Good job, Freddie.
Great. Way to know how many games do you have. Nick, you agree that the Browns have turned a corner?
No, and while they're still my pick to win their division, this was my concern Friday. I said Friday that the Browns got to be careful, that obviously they got to win this game. But if they win it, don't ignore in victory what you wouldn't in defeat, and don't just because you won a game ignore the things that led to the previous defeats. And if all of a sudden you think that the mismanagement, the poor play by the offensive line, Baker not playing well until the fourth game of the year, all gets erased because you won the biggest game of your season thus far, that can be dangerous. That can lead to a letdown loss this upcoming week against San Francisco. And so, no, I think the Browns are too young from a coaching staff, from a quarterback, from a skill position player standpoint to turn a corner, a significant corner in 1 week. I do think they stayed afloat. I do think they steadied the ship to a degree where now they have the opportunity over the next month to turn that corner. But if you look at, well, all our issues are now solved, and I think Freddie tried to correct it at the back end where he said it's just one game, we have to treat it just like one game. But you can't look at one great win as something that erases the reasons you had 2 bad losses in the previous 3 weeks and 1 mediocre win. This was their first good game of the season. The reasons for that don't go away just because you won.
No, this is a young team that still lost a lot of games. To think that they have it figured out. And I hope that Baker starts listening to the coach. Because really, when you're on a professional team, only thing that really does matter is what's in the locker room. And that's what Baker should start talking about, how the guys are feeling in the locker room. They went to the East Coast, went to Baltimore, arch rivalry with them. They won that game. Now they got to go all the way back out north, go to San Francisco. And they play a San Francisco team. They got 5 first-round picks on that defensive line. That offensive line is not out of the woods. They're getting ready to face good defensive line after good defensive line. And San Francisco's rested coming off a bye. Then they got Seattle. Then they got the bye. Then they go to New England. New England's coming off a bye because they got the Jets the week before that. So,
a de facto bye.
No, they are not out the woods. It is survival in the NFL every single week, and they have to build this momentum that they were able, from the momentum they captured in Baltimore, because that was a huge win. But we've seen in this league, it fluctuates week to week. The mature teams are able to get through the hype, concentrate on what they're doing, and try to get better. The Browns need to get better up front. They need to continue running the ball and take advantage of a San Francisco secondary that I believe can be had. So it's a good opportunity for them.
And the other element is, and this is where it might do Baker some good to actually look at the schedule, is the Browns are not one of these teams that you expected to or had to get out to a white-hot start. What they need to do is stay afloat until the end of the season. The final 7 games of the year, they play teams that are a combined 3, 16, and 1. You only need to be 4-5 through 9 games. 5-4 would be great, because where you can really start piling up wins is in that final 7 weeks where you play Cincinnati twice, you play Arizona, you play Miami, you play Pittsburgh twice. Your toughest game is home against Baltimore team you just beat. But if you, where I would criticize, even though he's not going to change, Baker's comment about keep the same energy, people will keep the same energy because you guys are going to go through another 1-2 stretch, maybe these next 3 games. And so recognize that you guys are in position to where you could, if you stay even-keeled, peak at the end of the year, but it does not get easier. Cris listed it. San Francisco, Seattle, New England are their next 3 games. If they can go 1-2 there and be 3-4, they're fine. But 1-2 is not going to quiet the haters. Right. It's not going to keep people from throwing you in the trash, as Baker talks about.
Let's move on to another team with some issues going on. The Vikings, not the way they wanted to start their season. Last place in the division after falling to the Bears Sunday. Their quarterback has been exceptionally average, and their offense has been anemic, averaging the second fewest passing yards per game in the league. Pro Bowl wide receiver Adam Thielen knows this offense needs to get better and fast.
At some point, you're not going to be able to run the ball for 180 yards, even with the best running back in the NFL. And that's when you have to be able to throw the ball. You have to be able to make plays. You have to be able to, hit the ball, the deep balls. You have to do that because otherwise it's too easy for teams to just tee up and rush the quarterback. So we have to be able to run the ball and pass the ball. In this league, you cannot be one-dimensional.
CC, you don't have to read between the lines. You just have to read the lines. He's basically telling you, he's calling out his quarterback, Kirk Cousins. What's your reaction to what Thielen had to say?
Well, I don't think he's calling out his quarterback, Jenna, because when you're playing team sports, at the beginning and end of the day, it's about each person doing their job. Last 2 seasons, the offensive line hadn't been very, very good. In the Chicago game, they weren't very good. The line had improved in the first 3 games, but they got exploited in Chicago. It was a mismatch going against Chicago. And going against Chicago twice a year, Green Bay and Detroit, what they present, how can you compete with the elite teams if that unit is that weak? So I know he wasn't calling out the quarterback, but they want to be more productive. These guys are used to catching 100 balls, having 1,000-yard seasons. Like, they have been the juice in this offense the last couple years. And they thought when Kirk Cousins came there, their jobs would get easier. And Dalvin Cook, once he got healthier, that, man, we got an explosive offense. Got Cal Rudolph at tight end. He's a good tight end. Used a first-round draft pick on Irv Smith Jr. from Alabama. He's going to be a star in this league. So they have all the surrounding things. But when you don't throw the ball and you look at the stat sheet after the game, you ask the wide receiver, he told you exactly the truth. We can't throw the ball. Kirk Cousins didn't have time to throw the ball in this game. Now, do they choose in some other games to decide to run the ball compared to throwing it? Yes, that's been their philosophy. We're going to take some of that stuff away from Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is not a great quarterback. They didn't sign him to be a great quarterback. And now that all these other quarterbacks are making more money than him at $28 million, you get what you pay for. He's going to throw for 4,000 yards. Can he beat those big teams in prime time? Those are the question marks. And to me, that offensive line has still not improved enough to be able to take some of that pressure off of Kirk Cousins and put it on them up front. We saw Andy Dalton last night. Well, if you can't throw the ball, you don't have a chance. And in the Chicago game, they did not have a chance.
And if Thielen's talking about one play specifically where Cousins did have a chance, it was early in the game, down 7-0. He has a clean pocket. He steps into the throw, and Thielen's wide open up the sideline, and Cousins just missed him. It would have been a touchdown, and they've got to connect on those opportunities because they are going to be few and far between because, to Chris's point, only Daniel Jones has been pressured on a higher percentage of dropbacks than Kirk Cousins. But good offensive line, mediocre offensive line, bad offensive line, these are the numbers. Kirk Cousins in his career is 5-27 against teams with a winning record. That's horrible. When you said primetime games, he's 4-13 in primetime games. Those games are usually against good teams and obviously the biggest stage. Right now this season, he's 23rd or worse in the NFL in rating touchdowns and yards. In touchdowns, he's tied with Josh Allen, Mitch Trubisky, and Daniel Jones. In rating, he's behind Joe Flacco and Andy Dalton. He's been really bad. They don't need him to be great. I agree with Cris. They have a great defense. They have a pair of excellent wide receivers. They have a potentially great running back. But they need him to be at least slightly above average, and this year he has not been. And he right now, along with the offensive line, is the biggest problem with this team. There is not a reason that the Vikings couldn't be a better version of the Bears. They don't have as good of a defense as the Bears, but it's relatively close, and they have way better offensive weapons. They have better running back, better wide receivers. Their quarterback is not right now playing any better than Mitch Trubisky was, and that's a huge problem at any salary. Don't care about the salary. At any salary, this would be a problem for the Vikings. The reason the salary matters is because of it, he's going to be the quarterback next year as well because that salary is fully guaranteed.
Well, I know you don't. Right now, he doesn't get paid as much as other quarterbacks. And yes, the money's not an issue anymore, but he was brought in to be a difference maker on this team. They were very close year after year. He was brought in to take them over the top. If it's not really just on Kirk Cousins, what do you do if you're the Vikings? How do you make a change?
The Vikings are in a tough spot. They've been trying to revamp that offensive line. And they spent some draft picks on it. We can't overreact to Chicago. Chicago's going to make a lot of teams look bad. But if you take the Chicago game away, the Atlanta game is not an NFL game. They ran over Atlanta. That game was over with. They only threw the ball, 10 to 12 times?
10 times.
So they didn't
won
need
the game.
to. So if they get a call, they called them for a pick, Dalvin Cook, in the Green Bay game, they get a touchdown down there at the game, they might win that game. Are we still talking about that? So the Viking season, let's not overreact. Chicago is going to make a lot of people look bad. The offensive line has improved. We didn't see that improvement in the game. Let's just see how the season goes. Their defense is going to be good. Dalvin Cook has been outstanding, but they don't have a chance if they can't throw the ball. If they can't throw the ball with the wide receivers that they have, because their wide receivers are elite. All right, we talk about them as one of the best two pairs that we have in the NFL. A lot is on Cousins, but let's not overreact. There's still only 4 games into the season.
And it's just such a brutal division because there's not a walkover. We thought Detroit was going to be bad. Thus far this year, they haven't been bad. It's one of the most difficult divisions in the league, in the tougher of the 2 conferences. Right now, you only have 1, 2, 3 teams in the NFC. 3 teams in the NFC with a losing record. So 2-2 ain't no good in the NFC this year. 2-2 in the AFC, you are living. In the NFC, you're beating the Cardinals and the Falcons, and that's about it. So it can get late early for Minnesota if they don't get their passing game short away.
Back here, first things first, joined by former Pro Bowler Bart Scott.
Man, we got a new sponsor in Ram Truck. We got new people watching us, Bart. I need you on your best behavior today.
Oh, I'm all about that money. You know I'm going to be right whenever you tell me about the sponsor.
Okay, all right.
Can I get in on this?
Yeah, man.
I'm from Detroit. My family,
We're
my mom
not
retired
even
from
in on
Chrysler,
it.
baby.
Absolutely.
I give you the triple. I give you
Best behavior.
I give you the A plan, baby. Give you a discount on them rides if you need one.
Oh, okay. Appreciate that.
Well,
Motor Trend Truck of the Year, Dodge Ram.
Here
New
we
sponsor
go.
of the show.
We are officially a quarter of the way through the season, Bart, and Russell Wilson has quietly led his Seahawks to 3 wins. So far this year, only Patty Mahomes has a higher passer rating. When asked about his quarterback, Pete Carroll couldn't say enough.
I think he's off to his best start ever. I don't know what it looks like numbers-wise, but I think it is. He's, I don't think he's ever been more accurate than he's been and more consistent and in command of everything, So I think he's off to a great start. I mean, I don't care how big the numbers are. I'm not talking about how many yards or whatever. His play has just been really, really sharp.
You agree with Pete Carroll, Bart? Is Russell Wilson the best quarterback basically in the NFC?
I think you can make an argument for that. I think Drew Brees will want to have something to say about that, and the blessing in disguise is that he got hurt, so he won't have that tired arm later in the season. But Russell Wilson, I think, is responsible for more of the productivity of his team than any other team. They have a particular style, and I like to think of the Seattle Seahawks kind of like the Patriots of the West, because no matter what they have, they're always going to be in it. They're just a great run organization. But when you take that much of the pie like Russell Wilson has taken, you have to be an elevator. And I think he's an elevator. He's not a stabilizer. He's not a guy that comes in and just holds on to the steering wheel and try not to mess it up. He's a guy that's realized who he is, and he understands when to take over in a game. He waits till the perfect opportunities, the situations to be able to use his athleticism. He doesn't put himself in harm's way. He makes sure that he doesn't take hits, even though he's an athletic quarterback. But the problem is that they're going to run into when they play against the elite teams in the NFC. He doesn't have enough weapons on the outside. They're throwing stuff against the wall. They took a flyer on Metcalf, but he's not. Nobody on his offense is going to strike fear in the opposing defenses. Minds. You said this happened when they played Dallas last year, when they played a mirror image of themselves. He didn't have enough to be able to be elite, and he had to be special. You can't ask a quarterback to be special every play.
Well, so this is the reason that I was so high on Seattle going into the year. This is the reason that I think Russell Wilson's the most underrated player year in, year out in football. A down year for the Seahawks with Russell Wilson is 9 wins. That's the worst year they've had. Every other year they've made the playoffs, and every year he is the forgotten amongst the 5 best quarterbacks in football, which he is year in, year out. Is he the best quarterback in the NFC? Absolutely yes. I'd like to say absolutely yes. I'd like to say Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers has to be better. And over the last 3 years, Russell Wilson has unequivocally been better. Drew Brees right now is injured, and you could make the argument that Russell Wilson, certainly the last half of last year and over the last couple years, has been neck and neck with Drew Brees. And the injury thing matters when you're comparing yourself to a guy who has never missed a single game due to injury. Dak Prescott, I know Dak's playing really well this year. If Russell Wilson were the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, they would be far and away the best team in the NFL. And so we talk about these other quarterbacks. We talked about Brady earlier, questionable offensive line, questionable weapons. Russell Wilson hadn't had a great offensive line in years. He lost Doug Baldwin from a receiving corps that already had a lack of weapons. And he makes it work with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Disley, the tight end. I don't think he gets a coaching schematic advantage. They just run the ball, even if it's not effective with Chris Carson. And Russell Wilson is the reason that this is a great team, or at least a very good team, year in, year out. So right now, with Brees on the shelf, with Rodgers, again, not popping statistically thus far for the third straight year, to me, absolutely, Russell Wilson's the best quarterback in his conference.
Yeah, I got to disagree with you on that. And even with Drew Brees. Man, he's got an injured thumb, but he's done too much for too long, overcome too many obstacles to not say he's the class. And after that, I'm going with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers in a new offense, all right? He's not fully comfortable with everything they're doing, but if we're having a fantasy draft, a for real draft, or whatever, I'm taking both of those guys over. And I don't care if you tell me, well, how long can they play? I don't care. Drew Brees can play a couple more years. Aaron Rodgers can play a whole handful of years. They are better at throwing the football than Russell. Russell's a great quarterback, a great leader. He finally has the team because now, no Earl Thomas, no Richard Sherman, no Marshawn Lynch. He finally won that team over because it was a struggle for Russ. He was not the leader of that football team. And there was some bumping of some heads in that locker room. And ultimately, Russell, because he's the quarterback and because he's going to play for a long time, and he is special at doing this. But I'm not going to all of a sudden, because Drew Brees has a dinged up thumb, I'm going to put him on the shelf. No, and because Aaron Rodgers has a new young head coach. No, both of those quarterbacks are still better than Russell Wilson. And Russell is a special, special player. He's a special leader. And you can see that with the consistency of them with that organization there in Seattle.
Well, when you think about the Seattle Seahawks, they have a style. They have a brand. And it's about, ball control, limiting the possessions in the game, playing good defense, stout defense in the back. Now, they're taking some flyers on some guys, like Ziggy Ansah. They made the trade for Clowney because they realized that they must, be able to stay in ball games. But they also been in one of the weaker divisions for the previous years. You think about the Cardinals, you think about San Francisco last year, and they've been able to benefit from that and just kind of being able to win their division and be in striking distance all the time. But now Russell Wilson's going to have to do more, and the organization's going to have to hit on some, they're going to have to find some hidden gems. We saw Michael Thomas become a hit. We say Alvin Kamara become a hit. They have to find, because when you take that much of the pie, then your organization has to be 85% as far as decision-making on who they're going to bring in, and you have to be big on development. What I love about Pete Carroll is what he is, he's still a teacher. I think nowadays we have a lot of young coaches that come in and have their system, and they expect you to already be a ready-made product. Pete Carroll is a developer of talent, and that's why they've been able to hold the fort when you lose a Earl Thomas, when you lose a Cam Chancellor, when you lose a Richard Sherman. But going forward, I don't know if they have enough to be able to get past like the divisional round or the AFC Championship, because they have to ugly it up. They have to muddy it up. If they get in a shooting contest, a shootout, they can't win that because he don't have the weapons to get the productivity that they need.
Well, we talk about that he doesn't have the weapons. Over the last 3 years, no quarterback in football has more touchdown passes. He led the whole league in touchdowns 2 years ago, I believe it was. And this year, with the worst receiving corps that he's had since he's been there, through 4 weeks, he has career high in touchdowns, a career high in yards, a career high in rating, career high in completion percentage, and he hasn't thrown a pick. I mean, he just keeps. Now, if you look at Pete Carroll's,
for 200 yards, Nick.
What?
For 223
Well, he's got
yards.
1,200 on the season, so he must have had some big games. If through 4 games he's averaging 300 per game, and he had a 200-yard game in there. He had 400 in the loss to New Orleans. He had 300 against Pittsburgh, and against Arizona, the game you're talking about, he had 240. We can parse it if we want. Against Arizona, they didn't need him to throw the ball a bunch. They were dominating that game throughout. But Pete Carroll, year after year, says Russell Wilson's off to his best start, if you look back at the quotes. But year after year, it's true. Like, each year, he raises the bar on his own level of performance, even if you pare away some of his talent. And so, listen, I think right now, I love Aaron Rodgers. My pick for MVP. Green Bay was my pick for the Super Bowl. But Russell Wilson, over the last, not 4 weeks, over the last 3 years, has been better than him.
But he lost 2 weeks ago to Teddy Bridgewater as a backup.
Yes.
At home.
Absolutely. And
so let alone is Drew Brees a better quarterback. Like, I don't believe New Orleans is going to go to Green Bay and beat Aaron Rodgers with Teddy Bridgewater. So for me in the head-to-head, like, that's a huge indictment on Russell and on that offense.
You got to
All
throw
right?
Carson Wentz in there a little bit, too. Carson Wentz, I think, is a good quarterback when he gets his weapons back. He's the next, to me, he's a close thing to Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I don't think he's in the league of Russ. Russ is a special guy.
Back here with Bart Scott, talking Rams. On Sunday, Todd Gurley had a career-low 5 carries. His quarterback, Jared Goff, meanwhile, had 68 pass attempts. 68. Bart, that's like almost 2 games worth. Gurley was asked about his limited touches. He said, I don't call the plays, bro. Like I say, I don't call the plays. I go out there and play. I block for Jared Goff. I run the ball, run the routes, whatever. Whatever the play call is, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to do it just like everyone else is going to go out there and do their job. It's 11 people on the field. There's only 1 ball. Bart, can the Rams make another Super Bowl run with a restricted Todd Gurley?
Not at all, because I think New England showed the blueprint. You make sure you have 3 deep. You don't really honor the RPOs. You understand that you're going to have a form of motion every time. They're trying to grab your eyes. But at the root of it, they're a downhill running football team disguised as a gadget team. You see the same thing with the New Orleans Saints. They're a power running team, and they need their power back to be able to limit the throws and the attempts of Jared Goff. I think if you would give McVay some truth serum, he would say that Goff isn't a great quarterback. He's probably 15 and below as far as that. And people are starting to figure out, okay, well, McVay's giving the answers to the test in his ears. So let's hold our disguise for 15 seconds where the communication is cut off. You saw Todd Bowles really covering everybody up and putting everybody at the line of scrimmage, making him have to figure out where the coverage was coming from. And then I think they ran into, the best offensive personnel in football. And I know that Jameis Winston kind of holds them back, but when you think of their, Godwin, you think of Mike Evans, but what makes them unique is they have 2 great tight ends. So they were able to get in these packages. I saw more personnel in formation, CC, than I saw in a long time. I saw trips, I saw nub, I saw bunch, I saw snugs, I saw 3 wides.
And doing a good job with
and they did a good job in really containing Aaron Donald, who's off to a slow start. It seems like teams are catching up to him. Now, we know that he can turn it on because last year, they were able to do that. But without Ndamukong Suh, I believe that teams are able to really hold those double teams on him. But Todd Gurley needs to be special, and I don't know if he can be special ever again. He's on a pitch count. They're trying to get him to the finish line and hope that they can use him and turn his attempts up in the playoffs. But you got to get to the playoffs, and you want to be able to host, so that you can use that crowd noise against the opposing team and keep Jared Goff protected.
You can't be – they are treating Todd Gurley like an all-time great running back who is at the very end of his career, who they hope can peak in December and January if you limit his touches.
Load management is what they call it now.
You can't load manage a guy in year 5. You can't, year 5. You can't, for Todd Gurley, a player who in 2017 and 2018 was the best player on the Rams offense, a Rams offense that in 2017 and 2018 was top 5 in rushing both years, and now is outside of the top 20 in rushing, and a player who earned that enormous contract extension based on what he did his first year under Sean McVay. That guy all of a sudden, having the level of production of some guy you bring in off the street who you don't know if he's a starting running back in this league, that's a disaster for this team. It is as if, I think we need to, and it's unfortunate, but look at the Rams through the prism of what if in the preseason Todd Gurley tore his ACL and was out for the year? How would we then say the Rams offense is going to look? Because while Todd Gurley is still there with the name on the back of the jersey, what that name represents is totally different in 2019 in early October than it was in 2018 or 2017 in early October.
Well, one thing, as far as this offense, once it came into the league, the league had seen it, but it had been a while since they'd seen this version of it. And they are a power, like you said, they are a power downhill running team. So if you put 7 in the box against the Rams 2 years before this, they're going to run the ball. And they're going to eat up that clock, and they're going to set you up for play action pass. If you put 8 in the box, even though they would run the ball to the weak side of the defense. Todd Gurley would break off some of those runs for some of the most fantastic runs you ever seen. Yeah. So you're like, can't put 8 in the box. If they went to throw the ball, there's no safety or linebackers that could guard him out of the backfield when he's in I formation. So All those advantages that you did have, now you don't have them. And they still run in the same system. They're still trying to go 3 wideouts, 1 back, 1 tight end, and the league has caught on to it. That is not a myth. Once you start in this league as a coach or as a player, they come up with a game plan for you. And they have one now for the Rams without Todd Gurley being special. And it's going to be hard for them because their quarterback is not an elite thrower. He is not an elevator. Well, he can be an elevator to bring you down. but he's not the one to be able to raise a whole organization at this point in his career.
Teams are going cover 3 and making sure that they have both of the edges covered. So when you bring that ghost type of motion with Cooks or whoever, Robert Woods, what happens is now you have the edges set so it doesn't affect you. You don't have to rotate your safeties. I can see them maybe going out and taking a flyer on a guy like Jay Ajayi, who looks like he's maybe ready to audition for some teams. You saw that, when C.J. Anderson came, the offense looks much better, than with Todd Gurley, and then maybe to try and be able to preserve him even longer.
But, Nick, you said earlier you can't load manage a 25-year-old. What can you do with him, though? You're not getting rid of him this year, so how do you use him?
Let me get here. You make excuses. That's what you do. Anytime there was a game and I was in my prime and then the ball didn't go to me, there's 3 reasons. Either someone shut me down, either I'm injured, or someone on the Vikings decided not to give me the ball. Those are the only reasons. There's no other excuses. Oh, no. He is an elite player, one of the best we've ever seen. Right now, let's have a fantasy draft. Just of the Georgia running backs. Okay?
Chubb goes 1 without question, and then Sony Michel, even in a down year,
I don't care. I'll take him.
Take him over Todd Gurley.
And that's the overall reality, Nick, that the Rams face.
And the problem was, though, that they went down 21-0 in this game early. Jameis Winston was on, and they went down. And Todd Gurley did touch the ball 7 times, receiving. They tried to get the ball to him in space, which is an extension of the running game. They just went down so fast, but it is an issue because they still haven't even told us really what the problem was in the Super Bowl.
Okay.
Nothing's wrong with it.
Let me tell you something. You let the Dallas Cowboys give Zeke the ball 5 times. You think that security guard had a hard time with Zeke in Vegas this summer? They will have to clear out the sideline. He'll be throwing stuff. L. Bell with the Jets. Can you imagine him only touching the ball 5 times? Something's wrong, man. There's no excuses. But when I've given you guaranteed money, I like you because they like Todd Gurley.
Yeah, good
He's
person.
very marketable, a very good guy. They're not going to let the cat out the bag. But the truth is, dude is damaged goods.
I think Cris has been nailing this for the last 8 months, ever since we first heard not only the report of the arthritis, but that even in training camp he was going to be on a load management thing. That is not what you do with a player his age in year 5. And the problem is, for these discussions, is the Rams have to lie to us. Yeah. They cannot tell us the truth. They have to tell us, no, it's part of the plan, because otherwise it betrays the player. Yep. Todd Gurley does not want them to tell the whole world that this is all he can handle, that this is who he is. So you've got to lie to us. And I don't begrudge him that. This is one of those good lies. Like, there's no victim in it. I understand why they're doing it. But no matter what you say, on Sunday you got to play.
And from a legal standpoint, their doctors are not allowed to reveal the information of a patient. And that patient is Todd Gurley. They're going to take this one to the grave.
They'll cut him when his guaranteed money's up.
No, I believe before that. Yeah, I believe before that.
Moving on to the Vikings now, not exactly the way they wanted to start their season. Last place in the division after falling to the Bears on Sunday. Their quarterback has been exceptionally average, and their offense has been downright anemic, averaging the 2nd fewest passing yards per game in the league. Pro Bowl wide receiver Adam Thielen knows this offense needs to get better and fast.
At some point, you're not going to be able to run the ball for 180 yards, even with the best running back in the NFL. And that's when you have to be able to throw the ball. You have to be able to make plays. You have to be able to, hit the ball, the deep balls. You have to do that because otherwise it's too easy for teams to just tee up and rush the quarterback. So we have to be able to run the ball and pass the ball. In this league, you cannot be one-dimensional.
All right, Bart, what do you think about what Adam Thielen said?
Hater in the house.
Why?
No, I'm telling you, Kirk Cousins is horrible. We knew he was horrible. We knew he was nothing but a glorified game manager, and Washington knew it. That's why they let him walk out the door. And when you look at what he's been able to do, and I thank you for not coming to the Jets. I appreciate that. Now that's starting to look like a bad contract. This was a team that made a move for the top quarterback in the market because they thought that they were close, and they were close. I think they were the cream of the division. But now you see that the Chicago Bears have closed the gap and then passed them, and you see the Green Bay Packers have passed them, and maybe the Lions have passed them. So if they can't get to the playoffs this year and you can't get out of this contract, I look at the Minnesota Vikings doing whatever they can to move up in the draft for either Herbert, Fromm, Tua, or do whatever they have to do because the window is closing. Everson Griffin is getting older. You look at Diggs; they're still in their prime, but they spent a lot of money at the top of their of their
they have
salary
a lot of
cap.
expensive players.
Yeah, they have expensive players. Just re-signed Anthony Barr, who shunned the Jets again. But when you have you spending this much money and you don't have that much salary cap space, you have to take it from somewhere, and they've taken it from the offensive line. Well, Kirk Cousins needs an offensive line. He needs all things being perfect so he can have the guts to deliver the ball down the field. And he doesn't want to throw the ball down the field because he has too much scar tissue.
Well, so your point about the Vikings clearly looked at last year and this year as a championship window, and they went out and don't sacrifice good in the pursuit of perfect at all times, right? They knew Kirk Cousins wasn't the perfect quarterback, but they also knew he was better than Case Keenum, Teddy Bridgewater. They didn't know if they could trust as far as his health, and Sam Bradford was the definition of damaged goods. So they went out and they paid for him. They went out and got him. The problem is exactly what you're talking about. With the money they paid him plus the money they paid to keep all that high-level talent on their roster, so many of those guys, and a lot of those are borrow from Peter to pay Paul contracts, meaning you're going to have to pare this roster down starting next season. And they did that because they thought 2 years ago could have gone to the Super Bowl if not for you got to the NFC Championship game, I should say, after the Minneapolis Miracle. So we'll upgrade at quarterback. Last year, Cousins wasn't good enough. This year, he has been a detracting force from their overall success. The 31st in the NFL in passing is a little misleading because week 1, they won that game, and he only threw 10 passes. So take that out of it. They're still averaging 210 yards per game passing over the next 3 weeks. And Cousins, throughout his entire career, 32 games against winning teams, 2 full seasons worth, 5 wins. 17 games in prime time, a full season's worth, 4 wins. Those are problems, particularly when you are not brought in to just be a caretaker. You're brought in to help this team take the next step, which they've been trying to do forever, and right now he's working in the opposite direction.
And if we go back to free agency, the Vikings didn't have many options.
Correct.
All right? They could sign Chase to a 2 to 3 year deal. They had no choice to try to improve their quarterback. Their quarterback play has improved, even though the team hadn't gotten better. The offensive line is not as good as it was 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So Kirk Cousins is going to suffer from that. As far as his contract, they're not overpaying for him. If you look at where the quarterbacks are making their money, what he's accomplished in this league, $28 million is about the number that you're going to get a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. I'm not going to overreact because I watch, of course, all the Vikings games. The first game, you got to throw that one out because of Atlanta. They dominated Atlanta running the ball with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook is the star of this team and of this franchise. And they need to try to put as much support around him as possible. They have enough wide receivers. They have tight ends, but that offensive line, and because of the pie is only so big. So they didn't have a lot of resources. They spent the first-round draft capital to get a center. He's helped improve the line. It makes a couple moves in free agency. But you let me know a team that's going to play 2 out of 3 weeks at Green Bay and at Chicago and going to come out with some great numbers. So let me know the team because I don't know that team. You go to Lambeau Field, all right, and then they're one play away from winning the game in Lambeau Field after being down 21-0. The game in Chicago was not good because it was a mismatch up front. But if he hits Thielen when he's wide open with that post corner early in the game, that could be a different game because Chicago is not going to score a whole bunch of points. So I'm not going to overreact. The offensive line is still a work in progress, but Dalvin Cook is the star on that offense that does have some good receivers.
Well, Carson Wentz went into Lambeau Field and dominated, the Green Bay Packers up front. And I would ask you this. Would you take Andy Dalton or would you take Kirk Cousins?
Cousins. I would take Cousins.
I'd rather take Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton's a much better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. I think we elevated Kirk Cousins too far because of some of the highlights. It's easy to throw for yards when your team is always behind. When he was in Washington, I think those were a lot of inflated numbers because he was always behind. He was always throwing the ball down the field, and he had a perfect situation. I think Kyle Rudolph is really like. We thought that he was going to be the guy that was going to be able to continue to elevate. He's on the decline early in his career. They don't get any production from him anymore, and they have too much money tied up into too many players.
But I think the problem is if you're making a Kirk Cousins-Andy Dalton comparison, then the Vikings have lost because they didn't bring him in to be Andy Dalton. I understand the Chris's point that it's not like the quarterbacks hit the free agent market. If you're in the market for a quarterback, you already have a problem. It's why teams hold on to their draft picks as long as they do, and it's very rare a quarterback that has any level of accomplishment hits unrestricted free agency. That's why he got the first ever fully guaranteed deal. But they need him at a minimum to be as good as Matt Stafford. At a minimum. If when you brought him into the division, you said he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. Can he be the second best quarterback in our division? And can the rest of our team offset the difference between Rodgers and Cousins? He hasn't been that. And that's been a big problem for them in the NFC, where 2-2 means you only have a better record than 3 teams right now.
Yeah, they don't get help by being in that division at all. We are officially a quarter of the way through the season, and Russell Wilson has quietly led his Seahawks to 3 wins. So far this year, only Pat Mahomes has a higher passer rating. When asked about his quarterback, Pete Carroll couldn't say enough.
I think he's off to his best start ever. I don't know what it looks like numbers-wise, but I think it is. He's, I don't think he's ever been more accurate than he's been and more consistent and in command of everything, So I think he's off to a great start. I mean, I don't care how big the numbers are. I'm not talking about how many yards or whatever. His play has just been really, really sharp.
Pete Carroll loves his quarterback every single year. Is Russell Wilson the best quarterback in the NFC?
I don't think so. I would still take 2 quarterbacks over Russ, and I got a lot of respect for Russ. And, this is like a beauty contest. So you have to be careful because ladies get offended, all right? So even the third most beautiful woman in the world, she's going to be upset that she didn't win. And that's what this is like because Drew Brees and what he's accomplished throughout his career, he might be the best passer of the football that we have ever seen, and definitely pound for pound. Aaron Rodgers still can play at a high level. He's got a new coach and a new offensive system there in Green Bay. Both of these quarterbacks I would take in a throwing contest with Russell Wilson any day of the week. All 3 of them are very, very special. So for me, Russell to be included in that class. Now, Nick always talks about he's underrated. Yes, he is underrated. And saying that he's the 3rd best quarterback in the NFC in this golden age of throwers that we have, that's not an indictment on him. But look at the 2 that are in front of him. That would be Aaron Rodgers, probably the most talented thrower we've ever seen with the football. Now we got Patty Mahomes. That's the only one, maybe. Those 3. Marino, Patty Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers. And then now we got Drew Brees, who's the most accomplished passer that we've ever seen play this game. That's why he holds all the records. So for me, hey, Russ, I mean, you're pretty. You're the 3rd prettiest woman in the world. So I know you're not going to like that. So Nick Wright's probably not going to like that
Well,
either.
Here's where I disagree with you. I think that Brees and Rodgers, clearly, if we're doing all-time quarterback pantheon, they are way ahead of Russell Wilson. But right now, this moment, the most effective quarterback in the NFC is Russell Wilson. And by the way, you can argue he has been the last 3 years. No quarterback in football has more touchdown passes the last 3 years than Russell Wilson. And he's doing it while they keep pairing off his receiving core. He doesn't have no Devontae Adams. He doesn't have any Michael Thomas. He certainly doesn't have an Alvin Kamara, a little do-everything running back. Last year he had Doug Baldwin. Doesn't even have that this year. And yet, despite that, this year, he's number 1 in the NFC in passer rating, number 1 in completion percentage, number 3 in yards per attempt. He's got no interceptions on the season. He's got the most touchdowns he's ever had through a month of football, and he has to do everything. Last year, at least Seattle had a running game that led the NFL in total yards, not yards per carry, but total yards. This year, that running game is less than 3.9 yards per carry, less than 90 yards per game, and he still finds a way to be highly productive. Aaron Rodgers, I agree. He's the most talented quarterback I'd ever seen before Patrick Mahomes walked in the league, and Aaron Rodgers still probably holds that title. But Aaron Rodgers over the last 3 years, not the last 3 games, the last 3 years, has not been as good as Russell Wilson. And Drew Brees, while he was sensational the first dozen games of last year, tailed off at the end of the season, and now he's injured. And so it's one thing to say a throwing contest. It's another thing, who's the most effective quarterback in the NFC?
Well, let's just take this. Let's take Aaron Rodgers and put him on Seattle. Is Seattle a better team? Hell yeah.
Well, let's take Russell Wilson the last couple years and put him on Green Bay. Is Green Bay better? Because
because he can't make the throws that Aaron can make.
But he'd be available. He's not going to get hurt the way Aaron's been hurt.
With the same offensive line, if you take the same hits, how you know he's not going to get hurt?
I know that he's had bad offensive lines. He's never been hurt a game of his career. Now, I'm not trying to take away from Aaron Rodgers. You know,
if I put Drew Brees on Seattle, we can throw as much as we want to. All right? There's nothing wrong with you liking Russell Wilson. But to think that he's a better quarterback, no. Like, he's not a better quarterback than those other two guys.
Just a quick question about the Seahawks team, because we really don't talk a lot about them. And they're quietly off to a pretty good start, except for last week. Are we underrating how good they are? You talk about the lack of weapons on this team and Russell Wilson having to do everything.
The only team in the league that clearly has a better coach-quarterback combo is Brady, Belichick, and that's also probably legacy, because right now Russell Wilson's far better than Tom Brady is this moment. The reason I picked him to win the division at the beginning of the year is I trust Pete Carroll, I trust Russell Wilson. A down year for them is 9 games, 9 wins. They've never even been 500 with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. So, yeah, I do think they're underrated. Right now, given what we've said about the Rams, I think they're the favorites in the NFC West.
They tried to get AB before he went to New England.
WWE Friday Night SmackDown debuts on Fox this Friday, 7:30 Eastern. To celebrate SmackDown's 20th anniversary, we built a ring outside the studio. Very nicely done. And joining us to break it all down is WWE Chief Brand Officer Stephanie McMahon. Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful. I thought I was going to have to put on my referee stripes when it came to the quarterback conversation.
That was a request. Every day.
The tensions were running high on that one.
Oh, no. We about once a show, Cris gets something wrong, so we got to disagree a bit. But
see how that works?
You're just going to let him get away with that?
Just like you're the Chief Brand Officer, I'm the Chief Brand Officer around here.
I got it.
All right, Stephanie, let's dive in here. What does it mean for you and the whole WWE, the whole roster to be paired up with Fox? How exciting is this time of year, and how's exciting leading up to October 4th?
Words really can't describe how excited we are. This is a partnership that I think has been many, many years in the making, if not destined to be. I mean, Fox is the best at live television, the best at sports, the best at events, and I like to think that WWE is the same. So we're, I think, a perfect match, perfect tag team, if you will.
I would say the biggest change in the WWE in my lifetime as a fan is the role of women in as far as tertiary characters as opposed to now headlining WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not pigeonholing you because you're a woman, but I also know that your background was a lot of starting that initiative, putting effort behind that initiative. Why was that important, and how successful has that been for you guys?
It's incredibly important. I mean, especially when you consider that, there's a huge knock against women's sports. Oh, there's no ratings, there's no attendance. Well, that's a lot because there's not a lot of promotion for women's sports. And then you take a look at WWE, where we had the opportunity and our fans actually demanded that we, quote, give divas a chance, which was how we branded our women's division at the time. They started a hashtag that trended for 3 days worldwide, specifically calling for better athleticism, better matches, better storytelling, better character development, because we really are this mashup of sports and entertainment. And Vince McMahon, my father, chairman and CEO, said, we hear you, keep watching, hashtag give divas a chance. And then we launched at WrestleMania, which is akin to our Super Bowl, over 101,000 people at AT&T Stadium. We rebranded the Divas division to the Women's division, announced our women would now be called Superstars, same as the men. And they got a new championship belt that was more akin to the men's, but still very feminine. And since that time, they've been regularly headlining and main eventing, and WrestleMania was certainly no exception. Took 35 years for us to get there, but that took place in front of a capacity crowd of over 80,000 people at MetLife Stadium and broke the entertainment revenue record.
So you guys have done a great job as far as the rebranding, but as far as how do we explain this to the people that WWE, it's new to them, and on Friday, trying to generate more interest in the sport, why should people tune in to watch SmackDown on Friday?
Because they're going to see something that they've never seen before. You know, it truly is a spectacle, and it is the best combination of sports and entertainment. So when you break down the storytelling piece, it's no different than anything else that's out there. It's protagonist versus antagonist with conflict resolution. The only difference is that our conflicts are settled inside a 20 by 20 foot ring with some of the greatest live action that you can see in any sport or entertainment property.
Is that why you think it's had such a broad appeal outside an athletic audience or just that entertainment audience? I mean, it seems like you have fans from across various either generations or various demographics that just are so drawn into it.
Absolutely, and it really is family viewing. It is generational viewing. And because it's so easy to relate to, because I think the best stories are the ones that are relatable, it translates. So we're in 180 countries and over 28 languages.
Wow.
Fourth most viewed YouTube channel in the world. Really because of that relatability, and plus over 200 different characters, you know, that are their own individual IP, which gives you even more opportunity to engage.
I mentioned to you before we went on the air that I was at what I believe was the very first SmackDown ever, if not the very first, one of the first 20 years ago in Kansas City. So I came up in the Attitude Era, an era where your brother is jumping off Hell's in the Cell through tables, still doing that, and where you were more active in the ring. What are some of your best memories prior to Chief Brand Officer when you were in the ring more often?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I did have to wrestle my father in what was maybe the first ever father-daughter match 6 days before my actual wedding. So that was an interesting moment. My mom was so mad at my dad. She said, if you give her a black eye, she gets a black eye for her wedding, I'm going to kill you. So that was a very interesting moment. But actually, it was only about 2 years ago that I did wrestle Rowdy, Ronda, Rousey. So it was Sans Attitude Era. It was after I've married and had 3 daughters, and I had the chance to wrestle Ronda in her first ever match in WWE. And that was a huge moment with my husband, Triple H, as my tag team partner against Kurt Angle and Ronda. And Kurt's an Olympic gold medalist, and Ronda's an Olympic medalist as well. So yeah, I had my work cut out for me.
Yeah,
I lost.
Yeah, bad news, good news. Bad news is, you heard it, guys, she's married to Triple H. Good news is she's got 3 daughters. Would you encourage your daughters to be involved in the sport once they become of age where they could make that choice?
My oldest daughter has already started training, and I would encourage them to follow their passion, you know, whatever they believe in, as long as they work hard at it. You know, I believe in a strong work ethic, and I believe they can do anything in the world they want to do, but they're going to have to believe in themselves and work hard.
Nick mentioned you thought you were at the first SmackDown of 150 years ago, even though you're like
20 years ago. 20th anniversary,
18 years old. What do you think the secret is to WWE's staying power? It seems so relevant year after year.
Well, again, I think it goes back to that relatability. You know, just engaging with our audience, and not just engaging with our audience, but letting them know that their voice matters. What they do impacts what we do, and we wouldn't have a product without them. You know, I could go into our various strategies, whether it's our pop culture strategy or, you know, et cetera, but really it is about just keeping that connection with your audience.
Cris mocks me because I love to make lists, and so if we were making a list of biggest WWE superstars ever, obviously Hulk's on there, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker.
The Rock, who's going to be there.
Well, you stole
on
it
Friday.
From me. On Friday, on
it
SmackDown.
It doesn't matter what your name. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, well, but SmackDown, which may have been named because of one of The Rock's catchphrases back in the day.
Yes, absolutely.
So The Rock going to be there Friday? Tell the audience about it if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, The Rock is going to be there on Friday. On Friday Night SmackDown this Friday, live on Fox at 8 o'clock Eastern. And he's going to lay it the smacketh down on the entire audience. I can't wait to see what he's going to do.
Any comebacks in your future?
Well, I can't give that away.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's on the board. It's on the board.
Anything can happen in WWE.
Mom's still training. That's what that means.
Mother-daughter tag team.
There you go.
No, it's not. But
mother-daughter, grandfather triple threat match.
Stephanie, thank you so much. We wish
thank you
all
guys.
the best
Thank
of luck.
you so much.
Welcome to Fox.
It's a privilege to be a part of the family. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolfe. So long, everybody.